Yarn. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today, Virginia? Another rule of engagement for the lively office.
Yes, yes. So what rule are we on? Rule 2?
Rule 2.
Rule 2.
And we say this a
Eh,
lot
We do. It's save yourself.
because no one's coming to save you.
Yes. Save yourself. That sounds kind of negative. We need to clarify that for the listeners.
It does kind of sound negative, but I think the premise behind it is, especially for new supervisors, they're waiting for somebody to show them how to do all the things, like show them the ropes and what's
Mhm.
next and show all the pieces. And like you talked about in a previous podcast about when you got in the new job, there wasn't anybody to show you what to do. I know when I was literally handed a clipboard and given 30 employees and said go. Like, and I had never done anything in the postal service before. So I know
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I'll do my best. Now, it was retail, so it wasn't like I was doing routes or anything, but still it was a big deal.
Yeah. Um I guess
So
in a weird way for me, I was like right after my 90 days, I started OICing and I didn't realize I was OICing because in my mind, I was getting 40 hours a week. That's what I was doing. I was just getting 40 hours a week. Yay. I was just getting money. And because the first office I worked for, I had like an amazing postmaster. I had amazing coworkers. The community was good. Everything was, it was like la la land. It was amazing. So I didn't realize that there was, another world out there. But when I got tricked into, and I'll keep saying that I got tricked into it because I was in customer service and I could have stayed there. When I got tricked into going into the plant, that was a real world. Oh my God, I'm in trouble here. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And I literally nobody was saving me. And I had a choice. I could have been a wow victim and be a little crybaby, but that's not my style. I always like an A+. I'm an honor student. Always a learner and also middle child hello competitive. I always want to be number one, right? I'm like, I'm number one. I mean, even if I'm not number one, I strive for it, right? So that save yourself mentality was kind of hidden in there after you get, I guess, knocked down a lot of times and you don't like the way you're falling. You do something different about it. You take control. And for me, that was a lot of due diligence. That was reading manuals, asking questions, being that annoying person that they were like rolling their eyes on the telecom because I have a question. Where can you find that? Blah, 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 blah. I was like that person. And I get it. It was annoying to other people, but where else was I going to get what I needed? Because you know what? I just had a memory. I latched on to the facilitators of the ASP program because in my mind, it was their responsibility to ensure my success through this training program and on the job training. And I actually vividly remember being just so disappointed and disgusted with their response when I reached out for help. One of the people tried. I don't know, try this, try this, try this, but never did they ever tell me that no, there's no boats, you're in the ocean. Find a floaty, you know.
That's actually how it feels too. I mean, when you said that, for me, I think the one good thing I had going for me that you didn't is, like, I had been in retail before. I was a clerk, so, like, I had something to grasp a hold of. I can't
Mhm.
even imagine being thrown into the plant and not having anything to grasp a hold of. So I
Oh.
had 2 things that I grasped a hold of. I knew how to be a clerk, and I knew how to be a coach because I was a high school. I coached for the high school for volleyball and cheerleading, so, like, I knew how to manage people 'cause I came from a small office too, so, like, there's always just 1 of us or 2 of us at the most, right?
Mhm,
So
right.
when you throw like, you give me 30 people and say, "Make these people work," I was like, okay, I'll figure it out. And I don't remember asking anybody because I guess I was at that point, I was just like trying to figure it out. And I don't feel like there was anybody there. And if there was, they were so dismissive, like, you should know how to do that. Like, just do this, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So I think for me, I just leaned on those two things that I knew how to do. And I did make a lot of mistakes, and they're not very forgiving. And I think I realized the more times that I fell and got back up, you're literally saving yourself. You're like struggling in the water to find that floaty, and then you're just so tired from treading water all the whole time, and
Mhm.
then until you finally okay figure out how to swim a little. I'm like, okay, I'm swimming. I got my head
Right.
above
Oh
water.
my god,
It's
yes.
like it's not how I felt, and
I mean,
then
I would have been happy if it was only 30 people,
yeah,
but this
I
was
know.
like from 2 people to 300 people, okay? That was big
Yeah. See,
difference.
I don't know how you did it. Well,
Resilience.
well, and then the plant, the boat comes by, and you got somebody, like, stepping on your head and shoving you down too, right?
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Constantly. Constantly drowning. The one thing I had going for me was that I do think that I have a charm or charisma about me, and I definitely had to lean on my personality and my ability to get along with people to guide me so that I didn't ultimately die. Like if I was a yeah, funny how I said ultimately die because that's what it felt like. I was
Yeah,
dying.
right.
you know, back then you're like, I'm dying. This is so hard. But and I was so used to being like very academic. And in my mind, in my assumptions, I just assumed this organization that was so old had all their junk together. Like it was structured and there was going to be rules and parameters and the way to learn and a way to get the A. I was like, oh, this is great. This is what's going to be. Definitely was like that as a clerk. There was rules and this is the process. And I loved it. And then I went to the plant and I got punched in the face because everything we were doing in customer service, we were not following the rules. We were not doing the things that way. And that's probably why it was so great because we were just existing and helping each other like normal human beings. Then he went to this super union environment. And I remember the first time I moved a person from here to here. I'm like, hey, can you help unload this truck? Did it all. And then the person's like, oh, you want me to unload the truck? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And then they go to unload the truck. And then the MDO is like, well, who's going to be like unstacking these GPCs? And I see another person. I'm like, hey, can you like sort out these, these trays of mail, blah, blah, blah. Because they were just standing around being a lazy butt, not working. So in my mind, I was just like, non worker, not working. Let me put you to work. You do this, you do this. And then I get this fat grievance because I didn't know. And they don't mention it at all in the training back then about unions and crossing crafts. So I get this fat grievance. I have no idea. I'm like, what is that even? You know? And because I displaced this guy from this job bid, we didn't have job bids in this tiny little office. What the hell are you talking about? The postmaster told me to do this. I did it. They told me to deliver mail. I deliver mail. Open the window, sell stamps, box mail, clean. I did what my boss told me to do. And then all of a sudden, I like yoinked this guy out of his job position, shoved him into a job that wasn't his. So it was grievance like dominoes because this guy was
Grievance
like,
dominoes. That's so true.
that's what happened. It was like, okay, so he filed a grievance because I displaced him, and then I replaced him, and then it was a clerk that I replaced him with, and then the other person filed a grievance because he was unloading trucks, and it was his job to unload trucks because that's the second thing on his bid, and blah 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 blah. Oh my god. I don't even know how much money ended up coming out for that little stupidity, but I learned quick. And at that point, I started pulling all job bids and I started being a maniac in reading them. And then because they pushed me so hard that direction, you know what? I hope I don't paint myself as a picture as like this hard person because I wasn't. I was kind but firm. I was definitely kind but firm because I didn't like what they did to me because I felt humiliated by that. Because that mail handler could have just said, "Hey, this is my job bid. You sure you want me to pull me out of my job bid to move me here from here to here?" Because back then, I don't know if it's still like that. They're probably more general now because that was a problem. It's very specific bids. Like I unload the belt and I do the AFCSs. And it was like really insane. So,
Mm,
you kind of, and I hate to say this, but I mean, supervisors, people, we do it. It's like, okay, you don't want to play with me. I'm not going to play with you. You want to go rules only? Let's go rules only. It's not going
yeah.
to be rules only when you like it. You're either going to work with me or you're not going to work with me. And that was the whole save yourself thing, because I needed to find out about the job bids. Then after I found out about the job bids, and then at that point, whenever I needed to move people, I find out this guy doesn't even like this one thing on his job bid. And it was like a secondary thing on his job bid. Shouldn't have told me that, because I got berated, destroyed. I was a worthless garbage for making that mistake. I really took punches for that move unnecessarily, because you should just teach me, right? If you were a good leader, you
Yeah.
would have just taught me, but that's not how you wanted to handle it. And that's fine. So when I did learn it and move the person, so whenever I had that secondary thing and I found out that person hated doing it, I would let his operation, his main thing, you know what? You're going to back up because you don't have the same dispatch of value. That doesn't even have to go out till later. That's an in-house little thing. It doesn't have to go on a truck. I would let that work pile up and I'd stick him in a secondary bid all the time and just make sure I never replaced him. If that's how you want to do it. And then I'd send him back to his main job and he'd have GPCs and cages of mail sitting there waiting for him to work. And he'd be pissed. I'm like, FAFO, right?
Well, sometimes you have to do that because that goes back to that respect, because they want to. And I think we talked about it in a different podcast about fear. And I think there's a lot of people out there that fear those grievances, and they
I
fear,
did,
like,
because I got punched in the face.
right. And I think sometimes that it's just unavoidable, and you have to do what you have to do to get the job done. I know I was fearful of it too. And then after I got my first one, and then I realized, okay, the world didn't come to an end. I'm going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
I learned everything about it I could to find out why we got to that place. And then I learned that no matter what I did, we were going to get back to that place again, because that was just the nature of the beast in that office.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do to make it happen. And then after that, I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna be alright." Of course, upper management's mad, but let them be mad. This is the way we gotta get the job done, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
if they don't have a better solution, I'm gonna come up with one. But
I
I
have
just
to tell you, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, in that motion, like there's kind of like a backstory too that I feel like that it's important in it. This person was known for being a punk. Nobody really liked this person. And I didn't know that at the time. Like, you kind of know it, but I never really, I don't care whether people like you or don't like you. You're a fresh start for me. I'm not going to jump off other people's opinions. So, but when he did me like that, and I got so much trouble from it, and I got street credit for my little my little plan of action for the way I decided to work that floor. I got street credit from the other mail handlers who thought this person was never doing their job during the most urgent time. Like, you're sitting there cutting open little bundles of flats, a standard mail that's not important, when there's big trucks that needed to get loaded, unloaded, and get off the dock, and causing delay when other people call in and there's like so much more important, urgent work that needed to be done. And like, that's the way you played. So I got street credit from the other mail handlers from that. And then later on in life, we actually ended up getting along real well. And there was a lot of volunteering, like, hey, do you need my help for this, this, and this? The whole environment changed, but it was almost like I I had to push back the bully. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? To earn some respect from the other employees, because they thought I was just going to do what every other supervisor did. They thought I was going to just bend to the will of this person, and this person's going to direct the way they're going to direct their work life. And I'm just a supervisor in name only. You just stand there. I'm going to do whatever I want to do. They didn't realize that I was going to actually make some moves. And I was forced to make them because I got throat punched. But I mean, that was a good lesson of saving yourself. The entire thing, because that's what I realized my role. Like, it was weird. I can't even explain what I mean when I say that. It's like I realized the divide that was there that I was unaware of. I realized that I was going in on the shadows and the perceptions of all the people before me. So I was dealing with a lot of things that I didn't even know I was dealing with, because of the way they were mistreated before and the way they were handled before. And so all this past stuff that I wasn't even probably even born when some of that stuff happened. And I had to pay the price because I was it. I was the evil manager, right? I was in management, us against them. And that was an important lesson about the save yourself, because I had to do something. Like I went back to school and I learned about this and I learned the contract and asked the questions, and I was the annoying one on the telecon, and I made notes like crazy. Oh my God, the things I learned. And I just asked a lot of questions. Asked a lot of questions.
Well, I think for me, what really helped me save myself is, of course, that learning, the education. But I think asking the question that I did that helped me move forward was, what's the end goal? What's the best thing for the business?
Mhm.
Because I knew that no matter what mistake I made, if I made it for the right purposes and I made it going toward that goal instead of what was easy for me, or like kind of in your situation, what that employee wanted. Because you pointed out something really vital there when you said the other mail handlers were happy because at that critical time when they're being pushed in your dispatches of value, he didn't have any work because his work wasn't for that time. So you were moving him to that dispatch of value and helping him with that process. And that's a business decision. That's like
Mhm.
that was not just about making him do what he didn't want to do. Like it served two purposes there. And I
Mhm.
think for me, when I figured out what the goals were, the real goals, like what we were trying to accomplish, because I remember when I was in that first office I was in, when I was handed the clipboard, as I like to say, I'd be out there and I'd be finally starting to swim pretty good and be really proud of myself because I solved a problem in the only way I knew how. Like I saw a problem and my limited small office mentality, I fixed it. And then somebody would say, "What'd you do that for? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. You can't do that." Kind of like you said with and you'd be
Mhm.
like, "Well, I'm doing really good. I solved the problem, right?" This is what, so when I started learning what the business directive was and what the end goal was about saving money or saving time or getting that dispatch of value out, I think even if I was doing something like that I had created or some idea I had come up with, I could say, well, the reason I
Mhm.
did it was because
Mhm.
this is the goal. And I think that's what saved me in the beginning, is that I didn't have anybody to pull from to find out what the procedures were, but I knew what the end goal was. So I just used what I had knowledge to get there. So that really worked for me. Just a different way of educating myself.
Yeah, that's true. You know what also worked was during that time frame is suddenly I just got involved at a different level. I started asking a lot of questions and it was seen. I really was good at reading or saving emails so I could read later so I could learn it. Then I would
Mhm.
see names of people on there. And then I would try to call and ask them questions. Like I really did. I was like, how, what does this mean when this is here? When I realized that the people I was working with didn't actually want to help me, that they were against me, that was a real help too. And
Mhm.
then it was fun because I ended up getting like the union would help me because they started to like me, and the employees would help me again because they liked me. And then when it became like weirdly at one point, it almost became like a popular thing to like me. And then some of these other peers, and I don't know if it's just that I gain respect because of taking the licking and keep on ticking, you know? I don't know if it was that situation, but then some of them would actually show me stuff, even the nasty supervisors like my peers, because I mean, there was one, well, Lord, he, he was sick. That's it. That's all I can say is twisted. But I learned from everybody, even the nasty ones. And I think that was my perspective too, is that I could thank every single person that I interacted with, and I don't have any resentment toward any of them because they forced me to grow out of pure necessity. And I knew I could save myself. I didn't act like a victim. I didn't, woe is me. I applied for this job. I kind of knew what I was heading for. I mean, I had a skewed view, but I don't have any regrets at all. In fact, I feel like I'm a better person today having to go through that, surviving it, because when you get rid of the idea of worrying about what people think of you and
Yeah.
just get down to, I'm vulnerable. I know that I bring value. Here's my transparency. I don't know these things. I want to know these things. Please, if you can't teach me, at least point me in the right direction. And just doing that, and then going to school, and then even talking to other people outside of my facility who gave, like, I did a lot of reaching back to my old postmaster, and then she would connect me with other people who were in the plant who would kind of take time out of their own day and still kind of teach me and help me. So, and it was all about that building relationships, though. It was really that building relationships, because if I hadn't built those relationships in the beginning, I wouldn't have had anybody to even go to. I would have been so lost, and who knows, I might have been fired.
You know what I think is really interesting is when we get in some of these Facebook groups and people get these jobs and they come across a problem and the first words out of their mouth was like, "Didn't teach me how to do that." And it almost reminds me, have you ever seen Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? It
Mhm.
almost reminds me of, what is her name? Baruka Salt, where she's like demanding everything. It's almost this weird.
Daddy, I want to squirrel.
Right, it's almost like this weird thing, like, you just did your career and you said how wonderful you are at problem solving. I mean, that's on just about every application, right? Problem
Right.
solving and all these things you can do, and the first time you hit a problem, you see it on Facebook so much about, "They didn't train me how to do that," and it's such a interesting thought, 'cause you talked about relationships where your success, and it's not easy to create relationships. They don't happen overnight. It's a lot of work, and that is a key. You have to create relationships so that these people want to help you. And it's almost like this demanding way of, they get into a new office and they're like, everybody should just run to me and help me with everything that I need. It's almost like it always reminds me of that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory about how she just demands everything. And there's
So
like a weird
funny.
entitlement. And I understand our training is not the best in the Postal Service. I get it. But there's also that sense of personal responsibility. You wanted a job, you wanted to take on the task. You've got to do some of your own digging. You've got to save yourself because
Mhm.
nobody's coming to save you.
I'm going to say this. I'm going to add something to the training. I think the training that's like, hi, I'm formal training because the contract says I have to be trained in this. Like for bargaining unit, I think there
Right.
are training. I think the training's good. I think the training departments are good at
Oh,
that.
yeah. Yes.
And what I think happens is that transition from bargaining unit to supervisor, or even in the acting, that's where there's like a super disconnect, because there is nothing there really for acting supervisors. And then they learn the hard knocks way. And depending on their personality, their way of processing information, their cultural background, I mean, the list is endless, is how they're going to respond to what they're doing. They're either have a positive attitude and take it as like, hey, yeah, I'm failing forward, or they're going to be resentful, hateful, and then they're going to take it out on their employees and then feel this sense of
Sure,
entitlement
sure.
and
Yeah.
like, oh, how am I going to ever get an opportunity if you don't share it? Blah, blah. It's like such a twisted little thing, because it's the most important job in managing numbers that they want from headquarters, and everybody wants those numbers, and who's that front line dealing with people, and they have the least amount of support, the least amount
Yeah.
of encouragement. It's so common sense to help the supervisor learn how to manage their staff, how to build relationships, how to motivate people, how to influence their people, how to get them to do something without saying, that's a direct order. Lord have mercy. Stop saying that. If you are listening to this and you are guilty of trying to get someone to do something and you're doing it by force because you're giving them a direct
Correct.
order, you need to stop, check yourself, and join the Lively office. Will help you check yourself and rewire you, or pick up a book and read it or listen to it on the way to work, because you're not influencing anybody. You're giving yourself a future life of hell,
Yeah.
because
Stress.
no one is going to work for you when you have to do that. That is insanity. And I'm not saying it never happens. I'm saying if that's your go-to to get people to work is by threatening, you're part of the problem that you hate. Everything you can't stand, you're part of it. Because that's not, no one's going to work like that. And it's not just some Gen Z thing. No one's going to do it.
No, it's so true. Yeah, I can't ever imagine a situation where that would be the norm, because I've heard it in some offices, like, that's the norm.
It's all over Facebook. And like whenever someone's like, "Hey, I have a problem doing this," like, oh my God. There would be like 52 comments that say, "Give my direct order." I'm like, what is this?
Yeah,
What?
I've seen those too.
Have
And
you have you tried approaching them like a human being? Hey, let's talk about this. Have you tried that before you went to using your tickets to the gun show, right?
yeah.
your
Well, you know
your
what's
power.
interesting about it? What's interesting about it is you see so many complaints about upper management, MPOs and, um, MDOs, SDOs, whatever, but then they complain and then they treat their employees the same way. It blows
Mhm,
my mind sometimes. It's almost like a vicious cycle of violence. It's like,
mhm.
let's just keep the cycle going instead of breaking that cycle, because you know what it looks like. You know what it feels like. That's the
Well,
interesting
let me
part
say
about it.
something else, that there's another cycle out there for the ones who start, like the ones who start to actually change and to be good. Like it is so much like that video of those monkeys getting sprayed and then not, replacing the monkeys. Did you see that video of the experiment from like 1966? Because if you are good and you give your people stuff and you have that like, no, you're not doing that to my people, you get a lot of pushback. I know I certainly did. Like you get threatened because you're not threatening your people. You get threatened because you're not giving them letters of warning because you didn't meet some goal, and you're like, no, 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 it was a reasonable reason why we didn't. This is the decision I made. I did this, I did that. So if you stand up in the company, there's a lot of times where you'll get knocked down too, you
Well,
know?
that happened to me with one of my carriers that I was lending to another office. She went to another office and they treated her like actual garbage. And
Mhm.
I stood up for her. I'm like, and I told her she could come home. Like, no, you drop the mail there, come back. Like, they're not gonna. I'm giving you them out of the goodness of my heart. I'm letting you go over there. You do not have to stay while they're treating you that way. And I went through a whole mess. I got an investigative interview, the whole 9 yards, because they're like, oh, you can't do that. I'm like, it's my employee. And I didn't like the way they were being treated. I stood up
Right.
for her, and it was rough. Like it was really a stand for me. And then, of
It
course, then you
is.
get the bully in, because then they're like, "Well, you have to bring her, you have to send her here, and you have to send her there." And I'm like, "Sorry, she's not available." So I would just work her, because I was like, "I'm standing up for my employee. I don't believe what happened to her." But you're right. There is that other side of it when you try to be the good and you try to treat your employees like you're supposed to. It's going to be a fight. It's not easy to stand up for what's right.
No, it's not, but it's always worth it
Yeah, it
because
is.
they see it, they feel it, they know it, and they got your back. They got your back.
It's
And
true.
I have to tell you, that's the greatest feeling ever, because you're not in that job to impress your boss. You're in that job because you have a responsibility that you swore in to take care of that community, to serve those customers, and the customers inside your facility are your employees. You got to make their job easier so they can serve the people in your community. And it's a very important job. And it's so hard right now. I hear some of the horror stories and I'm like, how many times will I be fired today? Because I don't know. As I'm getting older, it's like, it gets harder to hear it. It gets
Yeah.
harder to hear it because it's unfair, and it's such an amazing company. And it doesn't have to be that way. Oh my God, it doesn't have to be that way,
I believe that
because
too.
it's that ripple effect that if you come in with the right attitude and you are going to impact change, whether you know it or not, even to the person who looks like they're the hardest in the room. They're seeing you, they're watching you, and it can be different. You can make a change, but you just have to find that strength to do it. And when you flounder or have a rough day, forgive yourself, pick yourself up, and go again. And recognize that, just like that video with that experiment, and the monkey is in the water spraying. If you haven't seen it, just look it up. But just like that video, know that you might get pummeled a few times, but just take your licking and keep on ticking because you're doing the right thing. And we can exact so much change because the company really is such a good company and it matters so much. I think it's just a pivotal part of America. I love it. So I really do. I love it. Every time I go on vacation, I don't know if you're a weirdo like this, but I go on vacation, I go to that town, I take pictures of the post office. It's like I have to do it. I'm like, oh, there's the post office. Take a picture because we matter to the country. I mean, it really does make a big difference. And I think people have that pride and they should have that pride, but we're so busy beating each other up because we're so afraid to stand up and save ourselves, and we're afraid to like have that courage to just place that boundary and be like, not today, not today, and then just start working on the relationships.
So to wrap it all up,
Yeah,
and
wrap it up, girl.
wrap it up in a nice little bow. All that to say that
Rule
our
number 2.
rule number 2, rules of engagement at the Lively office is nobody's coming. So be ready to save yourself.
Yep.
Take that initiative. You
Yep.
can do it.
Sign
But
up for the course, read the book, do the training. Don't expect anyone to hand it to you. Take what you need.
And if you need any extra help, we're always here at thelivelyoffice.com.
Mm-hmm.
Boop, boop.